Dust settled upon the crooked cobblestones in the town square at dusk, disturbed only by the slow creak of a strange wagon rolling in from the far edge of the road. Rattling chains danced along the sides of this traveling contraption, painted in flaking swirls of crimson and black, so faded by grime and time that it was impossible to tell how old it might be. Those who saw it approach felt unsettled by the wagon's archaic sigils scratched into the wood, resembling symbols thought best left forgotten. Atop the carriage gilt letters, half obscured by shadow, read something about fortunes, or so it seemed. Lanterns set around the door glowed a lurid red, unnaturally bright in the encroaching twilight, like an unholy invitation, urging curious souls to come closer. No herald announced the wagon's arrival, no boisterous carnival barker preceded it. The traveling wagon simply appeared on the corner of the bustling fairgrounds, an area where other merchants and performers often set up their shows. But while the jugglers in shimmering costumes laughed and the dwarves in bright hats performed their acts, all who ventured near the new wagon fell silent, drawn by an instinctive thrill of danger. A hush bloomed around it, as if the entire fair held its breath to see what would happen next. Only a single occupant could be glimpsed through the wagon's window, a figure cloaked in black, seated behind thick glass jars filled with a dark fluid and implements of arcane design. Those who dared linger on the threshold experienced a tremor, a sudden disquiet that seemed to come from the ground itself. At first, business was slow. A smattering of folk dared to peek inside, but many turned away before stepping in. Something in the coldness of the occupant's stare, lit by the flickering glow of blood-hued lanterns, made prospective customers think twice. But as darkness deepened and the rest of the fair began its nightly routine, impromptu shows, the beating of drums, and rowdy cheers, curiosity eventually overcame caution. Whispers spread of a blood-reading fortune-teller who would not look at cards or crystal balls, but would divine secrets from something more intimate, a little drop of the visitor's own blood. Thrill-seekers found themselves drawn to the forbidden promise. The notion of a fortune etched in life's essence was both terrifying and irresistibly tantalizing. Amid the swirl of rumor, a local man named Eamon stepped forward, driven by an unshakable sense of dread and fascination. He was a broad-shouldered, hard-working soul, known to everyone in the village as forward-thinking and practical. Exactly the type never to set stock in jumbled superstition. Nonetheless, something had rattled Eamon of late. He had dreamed of red lights and ominous voices every night for a week. Perhaps, he reasoned, letting some charlatan read his fortune might break the spell. So, after finishing his daily chores and downing enough ale to stiffen his courage, he approached the wagon's door. Inside, the narrow space was blanketed in a haze of hot, scented air. The scent was metallic and slightly sweet, as though roses were combined with the odor of iron. Candles guttered along shelves. Jars and vials glistened with unknown liquids, from murky black to bright crimson. A single table stood in the room's center, its surface draped in plush velvet. Behind it sat the fortune-teller, face half obscured by an ornate mask shaped like a raven's beak. The figure's eyes were the real draw, deep-set, impossibly dark, reflecting the quivering flames around them. Without speaking, the fortune-teller gestured for Eamon to sit. The hush in that little wagon seemed absolute. Even the fair's clamor outside could not penetrate within. Eamon forced a gulp, hesitantly taking the chair. He cleared his throat, voice cracking. "I've heard you can read fortunes? That you use blood to do it?" The robed figure gave a slight nod. Gloved hands extended a small knife with a curved point, its edges so finely honed it gleamed with an unsettling luster. Eamon's pulse hammered. For an uncomfortable moment, the fortune-teller merely held the knife out, inviting Eamon to accept it. Something flickered in the occupant's eyes, something hungry. He took the knife, pricked the tip of his left index finger, and watched a bead of dark red well to the surface. The gesture felt more final than he had anticipated. as though he were forging a contract with powers he did not fully comprehend. The fortune-teller produced a small crystalline basin. Without a word, Eamon allowed one drop of his blood to fall into this bowl. Immediately, the droplets spread out in twisting shapes across the faceted crystal, forming patterns that stole Eamon's breath. He could have sworn they were moving, of their own accord, coiling like living serpents. A murmur escaped the fortune-teller's lips, some incantation in a language beyond normal recognition. Their eyes flickered, and the black orbs seemed momentarily shot through with veins of red. Eamon felt something tighten in his chest, hot and cold at once. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard a faint voice whisper his name. Then silence descended again. At last, leaning carefully over the bowl, the fortune-teller spoke in a dry rasp. Choice and coincidence are illusions. Dare you see the truth of your future? Eamon, teeth set, nodded. He had come this far. What the fortune-teller unveiled next struck Eamon like a physical blow. A few elliptical words and cryptic images were scrawled on a small parchment, the shapes curving in sinuous lines. Through halting speech, the teller announced that Eamon's path lay in betrayal by one he held closest, someone who wore a friendly smile while harboring ill intent. Blood would spill in the darkness of that betrayal, and these events were all but certain. Eamon fled, stumbling out of the wagon, sweats dripping from his brow, heart pounding so loudly he could hardly stand. Word spread quickly of Eamon's reading. None knew the details, but rumors multiplied while the carnival wagon remained in town. Some said Eamon looked haunted in the following days, that he stared yellow-eyed at every man and woman he passed, trying to see who might be the traitor the prophecy had described. Others told stories that the fortune-teller wrote him letters in the night, telling him to give up the search, that the truth would come swiftly and painfully, no matter how he prepared. Eamon refused to discuss the matter, but each time he glimpsed the wagon, he felt compelled to glance over his shoulder, as though expecting a knife at his back. The fair's final night arrived. Stalls were closing down. Musicians strummed tired tunes. Children yawned as parents led them away. The other carnival wagons were already pulling up stakes, set to roll out at first light. But the blood-reading wagon remained, unwavering, shining with that ominous red glow. Some said the occupant never slept, that their black eyes remained open all through the night. One final customer, Tamsin, a woman plagued by an incurable illness, decided to consult the occult. She believed if a fortune-teller could read omens in a drop of blood, perhaps they could also cure whatever malady gnawed away at her body and soul. Tamsin entered, trembling. She recognized the stale, stifling air, the many jars of swirling fluids. The fortune-teller inclined their head, offering the same small blade. She winced, but pricked her fingertip, letting her blood glitter in the lamplight before it was caught in the basin. She gave a quiet gasp, noticing a faint swirl of gleaming red vanish into the crystal surface as quickly as it fell. The fortune-teller repeated the same incantation from before, the same foreign murmuring. A sudden wave of dizziness swept over Tamsin, and she had to grip the chair to remain upright. Shadows on the walls seemed to shift with every flicker of the candle flame. With a rasping hush, the teller formed words. Tamsin's future, they said, was marred by a deeper cost than any cure could repay. Her affliction would lead her on a path toward an unholy vow. If she took it, she would live, but that existence would be bound to something malevolent, ancient, and demanding tribute from her body and mind. Tamsin felt a spike of cold terror raced through her. She asked, "Is there no alternative?" The teller's eyes narrowed with fleeting pity before they responded that all alternatives harbored their own hidden horrors. "Fate is a labyrinth," they said finally. "Whichever path you choose, the labyrinth's walls close around you." Desperate, Tamsin pressed her trembling hand on the table. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. In that moment, the teller's raven-beak mask, its black eyes glittering, seemed to tilt as though in quiet amusement. Tamsin was handed a small vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid. "Drink," croaked the teller. She removed the stopper and raised the vial to her lips. The thick fluid slid down her throat, leaving a coppery tang that made her gag. Instantly, her vision swam with red sparks, and she collapsed forward. Yet within her, a new strength ignited, a heat that cindered in her veins like living embers. Before she lost consciousness, she heard, or thought she heard, the fortune-teller's final remark. "You are bound now. The cycle will continue." At sunrise, the carnival departed. Every wagon and contraption rumbled away, leaving behind empty spaces in the fairgrounds. But the blood-reading wagon lingered a short while longer, as if hesitant to break its hold. Eventually, the telltale rattle of wheels signaled its departure as well, though its presence remained like a stain on the town. The next few weeks brought strange developments. First, Tamsin's inexplicable recuperation. Her fever abated, her breathing steadied, and color returned to her cheeks. People marveled at the miracle, though Tamsin carried a haunted look. Her eyes swam with secrets she refused to share. She claimed she had found new purpose and vowed to keep it hidden. Then came the news of Amon's misfortune. One morning, after working in the fields, Amon was found lying in the dirt, stabbed in the back. A battered scythe lay near him. The words, "The labyrinth's walls close," were reportedly scrawled in the soil, though the writing was smeared and nearly illegible by the time anyone arrived. Rumor, so prone to invention, said that as he bled out, he repeated a single phrase. "I knew it." The cards were marked. He never named his assailant, and no one confessed. Suspicion boiled beneath the village's surface, tearing families and friendships apart. Some whispered that the fortune-teller had pronounced a curse upon Amon, while others insisted he was the maker of his own demise by believing such an ill omen. A hush settled over the town in the months that followed. Though life continued in outward routine, everyone sensed a shadow over them. No one dared forget the traveling wagon and its occupant. Then, one late autumn afternoon, that same wagon rolled back into view. Its rattling chains, crimson and black paint, and swirling arcane sigils hadn't changed, though the entire contraption seemed somehow older, more battered. The festival had returned, bringing with it a swirl of music and color. But amid that lively spectacle, the wagon stood stark and grim. This time, beyond the window, no occupant was visible. The door remained closed, but a hand-scrawled sign hung outside. One reading, "Each night. Swords written in blood bind thee to thy fate." Some in the village declared it should be burned down, run out of town, or otherwise expelled, but a strange compulsion tugged at certain hearts. The future's mysteries, once glimpsed, become an irresistible lure. Tamsin felt the same pull. Something within her, the echo of that coppery drink, throbbed with excitement. She knew she owed a debt for her renewed life, that the wagon demanded its due. She hid in the crowd, waiting to see who would volunteer first. In the end, a traveling merchant named Oliver gave in to the carnival's hush. He had lost his entire fortune in a recent gambling fiasco. Ruined and alone, he craved insight. Everyone else shrank back as Oliver, with squared shoulders, approached the wagon's door, which swung open of its own accord. The interior had changed even more. The air was denser, the smell sharper, as if the stench of old blood had soaked into every surface. Strange trinkets hung from the rafters, dried bundles of wilted flowers, small animal bones, twisted lumps of dark red wax. Oliver's mouth went dry. By some unspoken signal, he raised his sleeve, fumbling for a knife, but before he could do so, the fortune-teller emerged from the darkness, a spectral shape, still masked, though the raven's beak appeared chipped and worn. Their gloved hands snatched Oliver's wrist with surprising speed and pressed the small blade to his fingertip. A bead of fresh blood welled. Oliver forced himself to watch as the drop struck the crystalline basin. The fortune-teller intoned the incantation, that same lilting chant. Then, something new happened. The droplet spread to form an ominous silhouette of a faceless figure, a shape creeping behind Oliver's reflection in the bowl's surface. The teller's voice cracked, deeper and more urgent than before. The next moon sees your fortune pivot with violent consequences. Your life's work lost. And there is a debt to be paid, a debt in flesh. The words echoed in Oliver's mind, soaking in like oil on parched earth. Terrified but too proud to show it, Oliver spat on the floor. "All lies. A cheap trick," he stormed out. To that the teller made no motion, no protest. The red lantern light followed Oliver's shrinking figure until he stepped into the open air. Outside, the last traces of sunset formed a bloody smear across the sky. No one spoke as Oliver vanished into the crowd. Tamsin, her heart hammering, felt the pull intensify. She understood that each reading fed the wagon, bound both teller and seeker to a cyclical torment. She might have tried to warn Oliver, but everything accelerated too quickly. In the days that followed, a swirl of violence and tragedy gripped the festival grounds. Oliver's goods were discovered, burned in a warehouse, the flames so intense the stench filled every alley. The man himself was found unconscious nearby, alive but delirious, babbling about shadows. He claimed someone followed him at night, whispering that his debt must be honored in blood. The more he fought it, the more the hallucinations enveloped him. Each morning, villagers awoke to new horrors. Animals found drained of blood. Footprints leading from their carcasses to the carnival's heart. Tamsin recognized the pattern, realized the vile hunger she had awakened was now weaving through the entire carnival, feeding on fear and desperation. One by one, the festival workers began to pack up early and leave town, unnerved by the sense of doom lurking around that wagon. Even the most brazen daredevils refused to approach it, but Tamsin felt compelled to stand before its door again. Her renewed vitality came at a cost. She felt the beast lodged in her chest, gnawing whenever a drop of blood was spilled nearby. She recalled the fortune-teller's last words to her, "You are bound now. The cycle will continue." She suspected that by confronting the root, the teller themselves, there might be a way to break the cycle. Or perhaps it was simply her body's new hunger that drove her forward, seeking a darker truth in those swirling jars. On the fair's last night, Tamsin slipped through the silent grounds, approaching the wagon's battered shape. The door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the fortune-teller was slumped at the table, mask askew, revealing a portion of their worn features. Closed eyes, rimmed by dark circles, lips dried and cracked. It struck Tamsin that this being might be as much a prisoner as the rest of them. Candles sputtered weakly, leaving corners in deeper shadow. Tamsin stepped closer, half expecting the teller to spring to life, brandishing the curved blade, but they did not stir. At last, Tamsin plucked up the courage to whisper, "I want to be free of this. I want everyone to be free." The teller's eyes slid open, black pupils contracting toward faint pinpoints of red. With evident effort, a faint voice hissed, "Blood has been spilled. The pact is formed. Only complete the sacrifice, and the chain breaks." Tamsin's heart clenched. She demanded, "Whose blood? Mine again?" The teller sneered bitterly. "No. The debt that must be paid is older than you, older than me. Through each reading, you have fed this entity a piece of your spirit. To break it, you must end the source." Lightning flashed outside as distant thunder rattled through the deserted fair. Tamsin realized that every reading was a piece of a puzzle, linking the teller, whatever they truly were, to a malevolent force. The blood offering had sustained it. She inhaled shakily and glanced around, spotting a large clay urn sealed with a wax stopper. A black symbol reminiscent of a serpent devouring its tail marked the container. "That is the heart," the teller said with barely audible breath. "The reservoir of blood from all who came. End it, and the cycle ends. But know that it might end you." Tamsin approached the urn, the air suddenly heavy with the tang of congealed blood. She felt her insides twist. A terrible craving awakened some unholy thirst that told her to break the seal and drink, to become the new vessel for the fortunes. She clenched her fists, resisting. With a trembling hand, she grabbed a rusted iron stave from the wagon's corner. The fortune-teller watched without a word, though their eyes gleamed with an almost feral desperation. Tamsin raised the stave high and brought it crashing down upon the urn. The seal cracked. Another blow and the clay shattered, releasing a flooding surge of thick, dark red fluid that spilled across the wagon floor. The stench nearly made her faint. The liquid hissed as though alive, momentarily swirling around Tamsin's ankles, reaching tendrils up her calves. She felt a clawing at her soul, as if the essence inside that vile brew sought desperately to latch onto a living host. Tamsin gritted her teeth, ignoring the searing pain in her chest, and smashed at the remains of the urn again until all that was left was shards embedded in the wagon floor. As the fluid seeped into the cracks, flickering flames from the lanterns turned a sickly white, and an inhuman shriek echoed. It might have come from the fortune-teller, or from the fluid, or from the very air around them. One final wave of the blackish-red tide receded, leaving only a faint residue and the savage reek of necrotic decay. Swanging, Tamsin staggered back, collapsed against the wagon wall. She blinked uncertainly at the fortune-teller, whose mask had slid fully from their face now. A shape of withered features, neither wholly man nor woman, not quite alive nor fully dead, stared with wide, unblinking eyes. Slowly the teller's chest rose in a rasping attempt at air. Tamsin repeated, "Is it over?" A weak smile flitted across those cracked lips. Then the black eyes rolled back into the teller's skull. The body slumped forward, striking the table with a hollow thud. In that haunting hush, Tamsin felt something release from her own chest, a gnawing presence that had lodged there since her reading. She exhaled, tears welling in her eyes. The deed was done, though whether for good or ill she could not tell. Outside, the storm rumbled. Tamsin emerged from the wagon. No watchers stood there to witness. Rain began to fall in heavy droplets, an almost cleansing downpour that hammered onto the carnival grounds. By morning, every last traveling stall would have departed. When curious onlookers came, they found the wagon's door open, the interior in disarray. Broken jars, scattered shards of clay, an eerie hush. The teller's body lay slumped over the table, pale and silent, the raven-beaked mask resting beside a motionless hand. No sign of the monstrous fluid remained, only rivulets of thin red water that the rain had almost entirely washed away. Word spread through the village that the malevolent fortune-teller was dead, that the cursed wagon had been cleansed. Yet no one could recall seeing Tamsin return to her home. Some speculated she had wandered out into the storm, either possessed by the entity or freed from it. Whispers claimed she roamed the forests at night, eyes unnaturally bright, stumbling as though half-dazed. Others insisted she vanished entirely, claiming her final act had redeemed her, but at a steep cost. The wagon remained a grim curiosity. A few struck matches, meaning to burn it to ash. Impossible as it seemed, the wood refused to catch flame. Even after all its occupants' tools were removed, it lingered like a specter, a reminder that some packs burrow deeper than mortal hands can reach. Talk of the wagon's mysteries persisted for generations. Parents warned their children never to step into anything offering a fortune read in blood, lest they feed an ancient demon that thrived on misguided hope. Dark stories circulated of travelers who saw a similar wagon in distant counties, drawing crowds with promises of secret glimpses into the future. Some claimed the teller was a different figure each time, while others believed it was an immortal presence resurrected by every drop of spilt blood. Yet more insisted the cycle was indeed broken, though no one could say precisely how. In the end, the villagers painted over the wagon's sigils, sold its chain and wheels for scrap, and eventually dismantled its rotting wood. The carnival never returned to that little town, but occasionally An old-timer would recall the strange nights under the flickering lanterns, the hush around the wagon, and the final monstrous shriek when the urn was destroyed. They would pass on the tale in hushed voices around firesides, cautioning that some knowledge comes at too high a price, that when one opens the door to secrets sealed in blood, it demands a piece of one's soul. Far away, in another province, a battered carriage pulled into a clearing. At closer look, it resembled the destroyed wagon. Faded paint in deep crimson and black still clung to its wooden slats. An occupant sat within, wearing a raven-beaked mask that showed no sign of wear. Jars lined the shelves, each filled with a mysterious red fluid. A sign at the entrance, scrawled as though by a trembling hand, invited the brave to discover the shape of their future. And so the cycle would continue, fueled by curiosity as old as humanity itself. Some roads are too tempting to resist, no matter how dark the journey may be, and for those who step through that door, giving a drop of their own lifeblood. The reading is both fate and doom, binding them forever to the shadows that lurk behind mortality's thin veil.